What Camilla just realized behind closed doors is that the crown she wears has never been heavier or more hollow. It happened not with a public confrontation, but with a simple change of security clearances and a rerouted itinerary that left her standing outside the inner council chamber, forced to enter through a side door typically reserved for senior staff. In less than 24 hours, the illusion of absolute control vanished for the woman who spent 30 years orchestrating her ascent to the throne. This is the story of how a single archaic piece of constitutional law, weaponized in total secrecy, dismantled an empire of influence before the public even realized a war was being fought. By the end of this breakdown, you will understand the exact mechanics of the silent coup that recently unfolded within the walls of the palace. We will unpack the secret administrative power grab Camilla attempted during a period of acute institutional vulnerability, the precise moment Prince William and Princess Anne uncovered the paper trail, and the ruthless, quiet retaliation that delivered the ultimate realization that she actually owns nothing. This is not a story about loud family arguments, but about the weaponization of administrative protocol, where a pen stroke can be far more devastating than an open rebellion. To understand how the trap snapped shut, we have to look at the immense height of the illusion Camilla had built around herself. For 3 decades, her journey was defined by a patient, calculated crawl from the shadows of public disdain to the absolute pinnacle of royal authority. She had successfully navigated the erasure of Diana's legacy, replaced old institutional guards with her own loyalists, and even began positioning her non-royal children and grandchildren at the center of historic state events. To the outside world, and perhaps to herself, she appeared completely untouchable, holding the singular key to a king who had become increasingly isolated from his own bloodline. What looked like a routine period of administrative transition was actually the moment Camilla chose to secure her ultimate legacy. With the institution facing unprecedented health crises and a depleted front line of working royals, a quiet vacuum of power emerged. Behind the scenes, documents began shifting. Viewers of royal protocol noticed subtle changes in the way information flowed through the palace. It appears that Camilla's office began systematically rerouting key correspondence, filtering the sensitive briefings regarding the Duchy of Cornwall, and attempting to establish a permanent, legally binding financial structure that would guarantee her immense estate rights and independent funding. Regardless of what the future held for the reign, that detail matters immensely, because she was playing a game that directly crossed the red lines of the future king. Camilla's strategy relied on the assumption that Charles's word was absolute, and that his devotion to her would shield her from any future accountability. She began operating under the belief that by controlling the flow of information to the monarch, she could quietly rewrite the internal power dynamics of the family, ensuring that her branch of the family would hold significant influence, even after the crown inevitably passed to the next generation. It was a move born out of a deep-seated commercial desperation, a realization that despite her titles and her crown, she possessed no inherent right to the vast ancestral wealth of the monarchy. But the architecture of the British monarchy is designed to protect itself from outsiders, and Camilla underestimated the quiet vigilance of the palace's true guardians. The discovery did not happen overnight. It began when Princess Anne long considered the institutional memory of the family, noticed discrepancies in the scheduling of Privy Council briefings, and the unexplained delay of vital state papers. At the same time, Prince William's team uncovered a parallel paper trail indicating an attempt to alter certain provisions within the royal households, adjustments that would have effectively minimized Catherine's future administrative authority while maximizing Camilla's post-reign security. When William and Anne compared notes, the realization was immediate and chilling. This was not a simple misunderstanding of protocol, but a calculated, quiet encroachment upon the sovereign rights of the next generation. The threat to Catherine's future peace and the ongoing preservation of Diana's legacy became impossible to ignore. Yet there would be no public leaks, no dramatic arguments, and no tabloid warfare. The response from the future king and the Princess Royal would be executed with a cold, forensic precision that used the very weight of the British Constitution as a weapon. The instrument chosen for this silent retaliation was an obscure, rarely discussed mechanism embedded deep within the framework of the state, often referred to as the emergency provisions of the Regency Act, specifically a precise interpretation of Regency Clause 4, a measure designed to protect the integrity of the crown when the reigning monarch is temporarily incapacitated or unable to fully vet the legal implications of state documents. It allows a designated council of state led by the heir apparent and supported by the highest ranking royal operatives to step in and assume unilateral control over administrative approvals, effectively bypassing any intermediary who attempts to filter the sovereign's choices. What looked like a routine administrative update last week was actually a total dismantling of Camilla's empire. Without a single word spoken in anger, William and Anne quietly activated these protocols. The execution was flawless and devastatingly subtle. Overnight, the digital and physical access logs for Camilla's senior staff were quietly restricted. Important state documents were no longer routed through her private office. Instead, they were sent directly to William's estate at Windsor for joint review. The long-standing practice of allowing her closest advisors to sit in on sensitive financial briefings regarding the future of the royal properties was instantly revoked. The psychological impact of this institutional walling off was immediate. When Camilla attempted to intercede on behalf of her staff, she was met not with hostility, but with the cold, unyielding barrier of official protocol. Officials simply cited the updated security and regency guidelines, treating her inquiries with a polite, vacant deference that made it clear her influence had been entirely neutralized. She was shown the side doors. Her signatures were suddenly deemed insufficient for major structural changes, and the realization began to set in that the immense power she thought she possessed was entirely conditional, hanging by a thread that William had just severed. The most devastating moment of this initial phase occurred when Camilla realized the absolute isolation of her position. For 30 years, she had relied on her ability to whisper into the ear of the man who now sat on the throne, confident that he would always intervene to protect her standing. But as the administrative trap snapped shut around her office, she turned to Charles for a decisive defense, only to be met with a shattering institutional silence. The machinery of the state had moved past the point where personal affection could alter the trajectory of the crown, leaving her to face the cold reality that in the eyes of the palace, she was merely a temporary tenant in a house that belonged entirely to William. The silence from King Charles was not merely a husband turning away. It was the chilling sound of the monarchy protecting itself. When Camilla presented the evidence of her revoked clearances, expecting a royal command to override William, she was met with a devastating institutional reality. Charles, facing his own profound vulnerabilities and the fragile state of his reign, understood that the survival of the crown requires an unbroken, seamless alliance with the heir. To publicly or even privately dismantle William's invocation of the Regency protocols would be to signal a divided monarchy at a time when the world was watching for weakness. In that crucial, agonizing moment, the king chose the preservation of the institution over his wife's administrative ambition. That silence marked the psychological climax of a 30-year campaign. She had successfully won the man, but she had fundamentally misunderstood the machine. To understand why this administrative lockout is so catastrophic for Camilla, we must examine the staggering commercial desperation hiding behind her royal title. The public sees a queen consort riding in gilded carriages, draped in historic diamonds and waving from the balcony of Buckingham Palace. But behind closed doors, the forensic financial architecture of the firm tells a remarkably different story. Camilla owns essentially nothing of the royal estate. The Duchy of Cornwall, the billion-dollar real estate empire that funds the monarchy's private endeavours and operational costs, belongs entirely and legally to Prince William. The grand estates of Sandringham and Balmoral are tied directly to the sovereign. Camilla possesses no independent constitutional funding, no vast ancestral properties of her own to fall back on, and no blood claim to the staggering wealth she has enjoyed over the last 2 decades. Her secret maneuvering in the weeks prior was never just about ego or vanity. It was a frantic, calculated attempt to secure a permanent financial and structural foothold before her ultimate protector was gone. She knew that without Charles, she would instantly become a guest in a house owned by a man who has spent his entire life quietly mourning the mother she replaced. By triggering Regency Clause 4, William did not just block a few memos or cancel a few meetings. He cleanly and legally severed her only lifeline to the royal treasury and future administrative power. The realization that she is now entirely at the mercy of her stepson is a psychological prison of her own making. The illusion of absolute power has been instantly replaced by the stark, terrifying reality of financial and institutional dependency. As Camilla's shadow empire was quietly dismantled, the physical space within the palace began to immediately reflect the new order. This is where the visual humiliation transitions from closed doors to undeniable public reality. Insiders noted that a prominent newly commissioned portrait of Camilla, recently slated to hang in a high-visibility diplomatic corridor in Buckingham Palace, was quietly rerouted back into the royal archives. In its place, subtle but unmistakable markers of Catherine's ascending authority appeared. The message was entirely unspoken but completely devastating. Furthermore, a specific sapphire and diamond heirloom, long associated with Princess Diana and historically kept out of sight during Charles's reign to avoid offending Camilla, was suddenly authorized for Catherine to wear at an upcoming state reception. These are not petty aesthetic choices. In the highest echelons of the British royal family, jewelry portraiture and seating arrangements are the forensic evidence of shifting power. By restoring these symbols, William and Anne are actively executing the institutional erasure of Camilla's long-term legacy, while elevating Catherine to her rightful untouchable position. Catherine herself has remained characteristically silent, offering no public gloating and no leaks to the press. Her uncomplaining sacrifice and steadfast loyalty to the crown over the years have earned her the absolute protection of the institution. She does not need to fight Camilla for dominance because her husband has already engineered the ultimate checkmate. This is the silent, masterful execution of revenge. Prince William did not destroy his stepmother with trashy tabloid leaks, explosive television interviews, or public tantrums. Instead, he weaponized the very institution that she spent 3 decades trying to conquer. He used protocol administrative law and the quiet, crushing dignity of the crown to strip her of her influence, protecting his wife and preserving his mother's legacy in the process. Camilla may still wear a crown and she will still smile for the cameras, but she now knows it is merely on loan. She has become a captive in a fortress governed entirely by the son of the woman she tried to erase. The era of the Shadow Queen is effectively over-replaced by the absolute unyielding authority of the next generation. If you found this breakdown of royal power dynamics insightful, make sure to subscribe and share your thoughts on how Prince William handled this delicate transition of power in the comments below.